you, President Kress. So it's my pleasure to introduce Melissa Ballou to our group today. And many of you know Melissa Ballou as the president and CEO of Penobscot Bay YMCA, or perhaps as a Rockland Rotarian who will be stepping up to be president of that club this June. But Melissa also has 28 years of experience as a public defender and a private legal practitioner. She regards childcare as a critical component of our state's infrastructure and workforce development future, and she has been asked to share her knowledge about Maine's childcare gaps at the local, state, and federal levels. Please join me in welcoming Melissa today for her presentation on addressing childcare gaps in Mid-Coast Maine.
Thank you, John Goss. That was a lovely introduction, and many thanks to Joan Fopp for crafting those words. I'm very grateful. Everyone can hear me okay? Voice is okay on Zoom? All right, awesome. It's such an honor, I guess, so tremendous to be amongst fellow Rotarians and to be amongst many, many friends of the YMCA. I know and see all of your names, and I'm very grateful to all you do for us and for this community. So together we go further, and I'm happy to be a part of this. I have a lot of gratitude for today's conversation. I do feel it's one of the most critical of our day. And again, as John said, those of you who know me, we all wear many hats in our community, of course. And it's a great privilege for me to have this opportunity to talk about childcare, because if there's anything that is critical to our very present and our future in and post this COVID pandemic, it's how we're going to tackle this childcare gap and how we're going to tackle the workforce development piece that flows with that gap. So again, a great honor to be able to talk about this with you today. I do look forward to many more collaborative efforts with this club. I always enjoy visiting your club, and I'm sure you'll see me more in this next year as John, Judith, and I do things together. So thank you. You heard the intro, you heard what I'm about, but I also want to tell you that I spent, during the bulk of that 20+ year career as a public defender, spent a lot of time in juvenile court. And that gave me a unique lens, I think, into the world of children and the challenges, the sufferings, the societal pressures that have been created over the years that make it challenging for families to survive and to lift out of some of those challenges. So with that lens and my lens with over a decade of overseeing YMCAs, where I had a chance in those oversight, I guess, opportunities with YMCAs to oversee many childcares, it gives me a unique opportunity to understand the business model behind childcare. And I've had a great time in my 4 years here in Maine, learning more about Maine and learning about Mid-Coast Maine and how to walk the walk, and how to improve childcare here. So I thank you, and I look forward to the conversation. I look forward to the Q&A at the end. As we walk through this today, again, I'm someone who enjoys, I enjoy conversation, I enjoy conversing. That's why I'm approaching it this way. I'm going to divide this up into a few chunks with you, share some data, share some concerns, talk about YMCAs and our role statewide and locally, and talk about what Rotarians and local folks can do to help support and help perhaps get us on a stronger road to conquer this childcare gap. Let me frame up for you, if you will permit me, the issue of childcare gaps and the connection to workforce development with a few statements. Again, these will sound somewhat simplistic, but they're critical to the framing of the issue. Without safe, affordable childcare, and I'll start with those two adjectives, safe and affordable, our socioeconomic machine will collapse. We have to have it, and we don't have it right now. And the challenge is, what can we do as a community, state, and even at the federal level to make sure that we can improve that? Simply put, that is the challenge, and that's the frame. A second part of the framing is that year-round childcare is an absolute infrastructure need for our communities. It's not just after-school care. It's not just preschool, that it's often called, for the little children before they go to school. It's not care for teens. It's care for children year-round. That is an infrastructure component, and we have to address it as such. If we don't, we're going to be in this continuous cycle and this circle of just challenge and problem after problem with no solution. The third framing I want you to think about today as we talk is that the COVID year the COVID pandemic has blown up the childcare issue. And I say a lot when I talk about this topic that it's made it raw. It's like it's opened it up and it's presented it to us and said, hey, this is a real challenge now. Let's solve it. Now, in fairness, the COVID year, and when I say that, I refer to the March to March timeframe. I know we're still in it. We're still sorting all this out. This COVID timeframe has opened a lot of things up, right? I mean, a lot of pieces of our community have been laid bare, and we know that we have a lot of challenges. And I like to say in working around childcare that the COVID year, the COVID timeframe has brought out the very best and the very worst of our childcare structure. We've had some tremendous opportunities come our way, but we've also had some challenges rear their head that, but for the COVID pandemic, I'm not sure we would have gotten to as quickly. So if we all know with tragedy and tough years often comes a bright spot or two. And for me, I say that the bright spot for childcare is that it's at the forefront. It's become an issue. It's become a bigger, broader issue of much more concern. And people, institutions, legislators, and government entities are taking notice. And that's good. We need to keep it out there. So with those frames in front of you, let me start a little with some statewide concerns. We're going to start high. We're going to go down to our mid-coast community. So in thinking about the state, there's some statistics that are current that kind of make us see where this challenge has landed right now. So 66% of child care providers in Maine lacked enough resources in 2020 to cover lost revenue and increased operating costs. 66%. And I will offer that a lot of these pieces of information, you could easily lift out childcare and you could put in other entities, right? You could say restaurants, you could say businesses, you could say any other nonprofit or for-profit. Everyone has struggled in some capacity during this COVID timeframe. Childcare providers have taken a hit as well, and that 66% of those who lacked enough resources to survive or to cover revenue lost and increased cost is a huge number. So the ramifications of that are that child cares have closed and child cares have either ceased operating and not reopened from the COVID pandemic timeframe. And we have families in need. Wait lists are blowing up in all child cares, and we don't have enough child cares literally to serve in our communities and in our state. Another interesting stat that surrounds the entire family, and again, in child care, we look at the totality of the family. We look at everything that impacts this child to try to understand what we can do to get them into safe, affordable child care. 57% of net job loss in Maine during the pandemic timeframe were female. So women bore the brunt of the job loss in Maine at 57% during the pandemic. Now, this is a national stat as well. There are national numbers surrounding this, but the concept here is that when a family has to make a hard decision during a year like the COVID pandemic year, and a family may or may not have childcare, they may have a child that has to be schooled at home, or they have some sort of alternating school schedule, and both parents work, something has to give. And the give has fallen disproportionately on women. So again, a factor to consider as you think about childcare spaces literally in our state and how many of them there are and how do we create more. Another interesting statistic about Maine, 43,000 children in Maine currently live in low-income households where housing costs exceed 30% of the family's income. So I don't have to I'm not here to talk about housing today. That's a huge component of this challenge. But when you have children who are in a household where 30% of the income goes towards housing, that doesn't leave much left, even if the child care is affordable. So that's a challenge, again, as we consider the totality of the family's need and how we can support that family in getting to more child care. Another interesting stat is that as of right now, approximately 250 children in Maine live in an unhoused situation where they do not have a steady home environment. Again, that number is expected to rise in 2021, but we know that that impacts child care spaces. Another last fact to think about when we talk about statewide concerns around children is that between, again, 2017 and 2020, we don't have the 2021 stats yet, a 38% increase in reported cases of children experiencing maltreatment of some sort. So that's a broad category, obviously very broad. But again, I share that final stat in this introduction with you to kind of, again, frame up what these children need in our state. So with all of this happening in this COVID pandemic timeframe, childcare again has been laid bare, and it has bubbled up to the surface as a critical infrastructure need. So pausing there a bit on the state and dropping into Knox County with me, a couple stats I want to talk to you about before we move forward into some statewide childcare challenges. The current child poverty rate in Knox County is 17.5%. COVID has hit our county's child care sites really, really hard. I mean, that's just an understatement, I guess, of the day for me. We average traditionally in Knox County about around 30 child care sites, give or take. I mean, those include in-home care, that includes care like the YMCA, Head Start, Little Learners, you know, many of the different child cares that you're familiar with in our area. A portion of those, at least a third or more, are in-home care locations. And that number fluctuates at any given time, again, 1 to 2. But that's not enough. That is not enough. And those spaces do not even cover the need. And one thing we have all seen, all of the child cares, all of us communicate with one another. What we have seen is the wait lists are skyrocketing because the need it's increased, and it is still increasing from the COVID year. So those two stats kind of, again, frame up our county on top of what we just talked about with the state. But I'm going to ask you to dive a little deeper with me into my world at the YMCA, and I'm going to talk about the state, all the Ys in Maine, and I'm going to talk about our Y here at the Penobscot Bay so that we can bring it home. A statewide look at how YMCAs have tackled this childcare gap. As you might imagine, this has been a hot topic for us throughout 2020 and now rolling into 2021. We've been active during this I say we, I'm talking about all the Ys, and I'm going to define that for you. We've been active in the legislature. Our collective group of Ys actually employs a lobbyist to help us advocate for these sorts of topics. There's something called the YMCA Alliance of Northern New England, and it encompasses all 27 YMCAs in Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. And those 27 Ys meet monthly. We have monthly Zoom meetings now. We also have a Zoom call. The CEOs all meet on Tuesdays, and we talk about important topics. I mean, one of the critical topics you might imagine that we've talked about for well over a year now is childcare. You know, when it closed, how we were able to keep them open, what we were able to do, how can we expand the sites? Is there money from the government we can use to help offset some of these families' needs for this? So we talk about all these things. We advocate collectively as a trio of states when we can, and then the 15 YMCAs in Maine also advocate collectively. We have 16 Ys in Maine, but one is the camp in Winthrop, the YMCA Camp of Maine, so they don't advocate with us on these issues. So the 15 Ys advocate for children collectively. And we do that, again, by defining childcare as year-round care. So it's the preschool that you've all heard of from like 6 to 8 weeks up until they go to school. And it's the before and after care at school sites. And many of you are familiar with this as well. It has to do with offering care when the parents can drop off early and then the parents can pick up late at the school site. So that's what we do. It's a YMCA thing. A lot of us do that. We have 4 of those that we do here at the Penn Bay Y. We are at South School in Rockland. We're at Thomaston Grammar. We're at Lincolnville Elementary, and we're also at Camden Rockport Elementary. Of course, none of those ran in 2020, as you might imagine. So collectively, the YMCA Alliance of Northern New England and the Maine YMCAs work together to try to collaborate not only with this lobbyist, but to make sure that we advocate consistently for policy needs across the state. That's where something like childcare and advocating for supportive childcare comes into play. So I want to give you an example. There are 5, what we call the 5 coastal YMCAs, and we all work together And it's Bath, Brunswick, it's Booth Bay Harbor, it's the Central Lincoln County Y in Damariscotta, it's us here in Rockland and Rockport, and then it's Belfast, the Waldo County YMCA. So those 5 YMCAs advocate together. We serve similar communities in a lot of ways. We have similar childcare issues and similar summer camp issues. So when we have, again, our year-round care of preschool, before and after care at school, summer camp, we try to provide year-round care to families. We all work together on that and try to be consistent in some of our offerings as best we can. Here's what I wanted to share with you. We did our collective data for 2020, and these 5 Ys, these 5 areas here on the coast, we were able to serve 222 children in preschool, 299 children in before and after school programs, 332 children in what we've now coined out of school care. And by that, we mean hybrid learning, virtual learning, and vacation care, sort of a trio of things that were created, some of them during the COVID pandemic year. So again, 332 in those, and then 802 children in our summer camps in the summer of 2020 amongst these 5 Ys. And last summer was a hard year for summer camp. It was a tough year. It was in the midst of everything. It was in the midst of the early rules shifts, the changes. We had to have a lot of restrictions in place. Many of you know this, but we were still able to serve so many children safely and effectively without any issues or outbreaks. Again, we consider childcare a year-round endeavor. So when we advocate for that and advocate for the workforce development portion of how this plays together, the childcare year-round approach is something that families need to plug that socioeconomic gap. It's not just childcare during the school year. We all work all year round, so it needs to happen all the time. At our YMCA, I want to talk to you a little bit about what we do locally here so that you can have some info on that. Again, many of you are aware, so I'll give some highlights. We serve children in a traditional non-COVID year. We serve approximately 90 children in our 2 preschools in Rockland and Rockport, our 2 early learning centers. And actually, during the COVID year, we were able to we combined the preschools, and we were able to serve the children. That's the only program that stayed open, So we were able to take care of that. We're able to serve, we here at the Y serve approximately 200 children in our before and after school programs when they're able to run. And we anticipate this summer serving up to 1,000 children in our 10-week summer camp session. That's down from some of our historic numbers, but we feel like we're going to land in the middle between last summer and some of the larger numbers. The need has been enormous. We've seen a lot of folks coming in. Also, I know you know this, important to remind that as a nonprofit, we raise annual support dollars to offset eligible families who need support in summer camp and sometimes in childcare. So that's part of the work we do as well to raise those dollars. It's important to also know that we are a DHHS subsidy acceptor for childcare. And by that, I mean that we partner with the state, and we permit qualified families to receive a state supplement for childcare, and that offsets cost. So I share some of this with you to help, again, set the stage for what it is we're able to offer, and then to try to determine what it is about childcare that just isn't working so well, right? What are the costs and what's the staffing challenge? So getting to that. And again, we were able to remain open for essential workers and our current families during the COVID closure. We have wait lists for every single early learning center classroom we have. And I talked with Joan about this a few weeks back, but we've increased our wait list at least 50% right now during the COVID pandemic. And that is something, as you think about that enormous need, I feel like that's the obvious bridge for us to talk now about workforce development. So in thinking about what we've just discussed, the gaps in childcare, what we need, where the challenges are, what our communities are facing as we roll out of this first year of COVID, what do we do to make this happen? Where can we have more spots for childcare? Where can we help the staffing issue? So again, that alliance of YMCAs I talked to you about earlier, the YMCA Alliance of Northern New England and the Ys in Maine. Collectively, we advocate again together. The YMCA is the largest early care and education provider in Maine. Collectively, the 15 Ys serve more than 1,500 children at 59 childcare sites across the state. So that's our total across the state. And I'm going to share with you a quote. We do a lot of, and I think I talked with Joan about this as well, but we talk a bit about, we do testimony quite a few times, I guess, during each legislative session. We do a lot of prep work. We partner with other statewide entities like the Maine Association for Early Learning and the Children's Cabinet. We do a lot of work with them as the WISE collectively to try to have consistent policy regarding childcare, with hope to get some legislation that will benefit our staff and our funding streams. But here's a quote that we say each time we start our testimony, and I want to share this with you. Ensuring that all young children have an equal opportunity for healthy growth and development is a long-term investment in Maine's future prosperity. 90% of a child's brain develops as early as 5 years old, and positive early learning experiences establish strong foundations for the brain's architecture. We know that we have to take care of our children, and we know that having that equal opportunity is a long-term investment, and that gets us to this infrastructure demand and the demand for funding of some sort to support this. I want to, I guess, laying the foundation. I'm pausing because I think about laying the foundation for these future successes, and how do we do that? We all struggle, every single YMCA, including ours here in Rockport and Rockland, struggle with recruitment and retention of staff. Now, again, as I said, you could plug in other businesses in an earlier comment I made. You could also plug in any other business here. I recognize clearly this is a deep problem and a deep challenge for our state. However, when you think about the educational components of what we do in childcare and some of the restrictions that we have, the investment in childcare infrastructure still is something we have to take a strong look at. We can't use more traditional business practices to adjust the challenge. For example, we have ratios that are required and we're licensed by the state. And a great example is our infants. Infants have a 4-to-1 ratio, 4 children to 1 staff person. And you can't say, oh, well, you know, I'm having a hard time getting another infant teacher this week, so we'll just go with 2 instead of 3. You can't do that, right? You can't. So it's not something where you can do a staff reduction to try to cover. And you can't consistently lift the other end, right? Pricing, you can't consistently lift pricing. An average week of childcare here at this YMCA is $200 a week. So if you think about that, you can't, there's a threshold, right? Jim Bowditch and I talk about this with membership pricing a lot. There's a threshold of what is affordable. And remember what I said at the very beginning, safe, affordable childcare. So it has to balance at some point. So if the demand for childcare is higher, we don't have enough spots, we don't have enough teachers, we have to pay our educators more to get them to work at the Y, we're going to have a way to offset that if we can't raise prices. So, you know, I know you probably didn't anticipate an economics lesson, but that's, you know, it's hard to do because of the rules surrounding childcare, because a lot of people will say to me, well, why don't you just cut this? Or why don't you just do that? And I agree, in a lot of departments, you can do that at a YMCA, and a lot of nonprofit areas, you can cut things, but that's one you can't cut. So that's one we have to balance somehow. We need to expand, and we need to have more childcare sites happen. But again, without the staff and the ability to retain staff, we cannot open sites. And again, I want to share something I shared with Joan in talking a little bit back on this. We have, we being our YMCA here in Penn Bay, we have 2 opportunities right now pending with 2 churches in the area to open childcare space. It's a collaborative partnership. One of the 2 has an additional partnership with another nonprofit. It's all of us working together to try to maximize effort in the Mid-Coast and not duplicate efforts. If we've got existing space that's out there, like a church, and we've got another nonprofit who can partner with the Y to make a childcare happen, let's do it, right? So we have these 2 possibilities. We've gone through steps, we're progressing down, we're still trying to make it happen. But then comes the staffing piece, right? The staffing piece. And if you can't staff the new childcares and you can't create an educational environment that has qualified educators to teach and take care of the children, then you're not going to be able to run the childcare. So we're consistently bumping up against the childcare educator component. Where do you do this? How do you pay this person? What does this look like? So I want to share with you again a little bit of information here from some of the testimony that we prepare when we testify. And I've said this many times today and over the past, 3-4 months in the legislature. Despite what we know about the importance of positive and enriching experiences in young children's lives, early educators earn the lowest wages in the education field. In Maine, the median wage of the workforce, the early educator workforce, is approximately $11.18 to $12 an hour. And that equates to about $23K a year. And again, these are folks who have either 2-year associate's degrees or 4-year degrees in early childhood education. Some of the staff that are entry-level staff, that are assistants, are either working on their bachelor's or almost at that point. And they're required to have things like 40 hours of training a year. There's all sorts of requirements for them as educators, but this is where the median, this is where it rests, right? So how is that going to work? How are you going to retain and recruit staff at that level? One thing we've done here at RWise, we've gone ahead and lifted our minimum for childcare up to 15. We've had to do that. We've had to make sure we start at that wage and then we go up from that point, because it's impossible, absolutely impossible for us to recruit quality staff and attempt to retain them if we don't at least start there right now. But again, when I just shifted that with the board support about 2 months ago, we went ahead and shifted that, even though we're struggling financially as an institution. As all of you know, anyone who runs a business totally gets, the increase is enormous. It's almost a $225,000 annual increase for us to do that. So it's an investment in childcare from our board, an investment in the staff team that we're trying to build, an investment in our staff team, our childcare staff team as educators. But where's that offset going to come? You know, where are we going to get that money and how are we going to make this happen? So that's the constant rub, right? Trying to balance those two things to see how you can make your staff team, your childcare staff team, be appreciated for the amazing educators that they are. They have one of our community's most critical jobs in caring for children. And yet it's very hard to meet that balance on what we would bring in as a YMCA with what we should be paying these staff. So there's that balance right there. So I want to share that. And let me share this last piece of the quote. Improved compensation and other professional supports for the workforce will improve our early care and education system. And that we have an example, obviously, much like a home remodeling project, when you run into a problem, you need more resources to fix it, not less. We need to increase our state's commitment to early care and education so we can update and strengthen it. Again, if we invest in our early educators, they can focus on their work, building our children and creating that cyclical, beautiful future workforce, and children that are well-adjusted and happy. You know, that's a bottom line there as well. So I'm going to spend the last 5 minutes or so just talking about what Rotarians and the public can do. And I always think about this from a Rotary perspective because that's the source of this conversation today. What can we do? How can we help? And how can we think about this workforce gap in childcare in a very critical manner? And one thing is to advocate with state legislators for childcare staff and childcare site investment. And I'm going to just comment for a second. In the last year, we all know there's a lot of dollars that have flown into our state, right? A lot of federal governmental support has come through. CARES Act, the America CARES Act. There's money right now that's about to come to our respective counties that's going to be disseminated to use for different projects. I would argue that some of that money should help in some way offset childcare. I don't pretend to have all the answers. I don't know exactly what that could be, but I know that if there are dollars available to help us at least massage this crisis as we roll into what everything will look like in a post-COVID pandemic world, we've got to do something to prop up a little bit more of these childcare sites, because that's a challenge, and we have to do something to offset some of the wages and education piece for our children. Another piece that I would like to leave you with is something you can do is to start to practice what I call speaking the language of the childcare gap. And that language is to see childcare staff as educators. Again, many of them have, most of them have either 2 or 4 year degrees in childcare. We ask you to think of them as educators and treat them as such. The other piece of the language of the gap is the infrastructure, acknowledging childcare as a critical infrastructure. So as ambassadors, as Rotarians, we're all ambassadors in our community. And we have many chances to be in different conversations. And if you have a chance to be in a conversation where you can talk a bit about childcare and some of the gaps in the wage gap and the site gap and not enough spaces for children, and perhaps share your ideas on how some of that could be solved, I ask you to be that ambassador and be that voice and help us keep this at the forefront so that we can continue to press for this infrastructure challenge that we have with our childcare teachers. I'm going to pause there, John. I think I just wanted to share a couple numbers with you. I anticipated there'll be some, I haven't looked at the chat, but I think there'll be some questions about numbers. I referenced for you that it's about $200 a week for childcare, and that's pretty average. That's an average YMCA cost. It's about $165 average a week for summer camp. And before and after care for childcare, that's what happens at the schools before and after. That varies. It can be anywhere from, I mean, it's usually $40 to $50 a week. It just depends on what that could be. So it depends on where, the location, the transportation, and a lot of issues. But clearly, that's just a few hours on either end of the day, so it's a much lower fee. I love this topic. There's so many angles you could dive from this and talk a lot about what we could do to make this stronger. And again, it's a nationwide issue. It's not just here in Maine, but it's something that I think we all need to have incredible awareness of and continue to fight for. So John, I'll pause there.
Melissa, thanks very much. Really informative as to what you're able to do at the Y and the surrounding areas as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to, there are a bunch of questions. I'm going to turn it over to Matt and Rich. I believe Matt's got the first question for you.
Yeah, hi, Melissa. Thanks. This comes from Bob Baldwin. Melissa, thanks for this presentation, and you're helping us sell our Rotary nuts. Was our recent low job report due, in your opinion, more on lack of childcare versus the higher unemployment payments versus the fear of contagion at the workplace?
I'm looking at the chat while you're talking so I can read it as well. Recent low job report. Oh, Bob, great question. And I think it could be all of those things. I think your last comment there about fear of contagion, I think in the beginning, when I say back last year, 2020, probably April, May, as we were rolling into the first few months of this, I think that there was a tremendous amount of fear. And I think that as we worked through the summer months and came into the fall, we've had zero issues at any of our locations at the Y, zero outbreaks, no issues at all. And I think that was tamed a bit. I think I would then fall back on lack of childcare. And then I think higher unemployment would fall right there. I think all of those play a role. And I think together they were a perfect storm for this sort of raw opening of the childcare wound.
Okay, Melissa, thanks again. It's good to see you in another place. The Joan Fopp asked, can you help us understand why, with so many job losses due to COVID, the demand for childcare increases?
That's a great question, Joan. It seems almost antithetical, doesn't it? It doesn't seem to balance. And I don't have a perfect answer for that. I know that one response I had a few families that I talked to about that were childcare families. And a lot of them were relocating for jobs. So one parent would leave and go someplace else to try and work away from the mid-coast. And then that left one parent. So there was some increased need there. Other than that, no idea. I just know that it has swollen. The only other thing, trying to think of some of the other reasons I've heard from parents, I think some of it was just being at home all the time, and parents actually wanted to have a bit of a break so that if they were homeschooling or doing whatever virtual care that the parent had to do, some of the younger children could come to childcare while the older children were being schooled. So a balancing of the family dynamic, perhaps a reprieve. Other than that, I don't have a lot of answers for that, Joan, but that's a great question.
Thanks. This is from Diane Lebson. Melissa, thank you for being here today. What is the breakdown of the Penn Bay Wise daycare program budget, e.g. from government, user fees, and philanthropy?
Great question. I'm going to go off of my memory here. I would say for program budget, I would say it's approximately 75%. And I would say another 20% probably from our DHHS program that we work with the government. And then philanthropy, philanthropy offsets in childcare post DHHS. So if that makes sense to you, families who qualify for either scholarship and or DHHS subsidy often can get their childcare completely covered from DHHS. So we have families apply to DHHS first, and then whatever is left, we will then support. So it's a way to balance out and allow the Y to spread their scholarship dollars a bit more broadly, but it also permits the families to get more money toward childcare. So that would be, the philanthropy piece would be a smaller portion in childcare, unlike Diane, many of our other Y programs where philanthropy and annual giving would play a huge role. Like camp, summer camp, for example. Philanthropy plays a huge role there, up 40, almost 50%.
Okay, and then from Jim Bowditch, has the Y national or any of the regional associations or local Ys taken a position on vaccination?
Yeah, good question, Jim. Not yet. The answer we're getting from the Y national and of course the regional associations and alliances will follow suit is until it's all completely approved by the FDA, the same language we all hear right now, right? That there's not going to be any comment on that. I would clearly, a lot of YMCAs around the country, including our friends down the road in Booth Bay Harbor, are hosting vaccination sites. So generally speaking, the Y is in favor of vaccination as a whole, but whether or not it's a mandatory piece, they won't take a position on that until the FDA is finished. And I dare say they won't fall in the mandatory crowd, but that's my guess. So don't quote me on that one.
Thank you. This is from Audrey Klein Leach. This is picking up on Diane's question, and you may have answered a portion of this.
Yeah.
What is the actual cost per child for care versus what you actually are able to charge? How is the gap covered?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think, Audrey, if I'm following, you're talking about, say it's, use one child as an example, $200 per week. What's all the additional costs piled on top of that that covers the Y? So normally we would average that out when we do philanthropy ask. We would talk of around $650 to $700 per child per week. By the time you add on things, I assume you're talking about overhead costs, all that, all the good stuff, insurance and everything. So it would add, again, because we care for a lot of children, it may not be as high as you thought it would be, but normally we run around. I think when I talk to donors, I generally rest with 700. It's a good number for me to rest with. And how is the gap covered? The gap is covered from other operations, other revenue sources within the Y, and also from, and we have some grants, but most of the grants aren't for operations like that, so we can't use them for that purpose. And some of it might be philanthropy, but most of it's user fees and membership dues, other things that the Y charges money for that offset the overall costs.
And now John Goss asked a question about upskilling and reskilling education opportunities for potential staff in our area. And let me add, because maybe I missed it, Melissa, that what are the requirements? What are the certificated, what are the requirements to become a teacher in one of your programs? Does it vary by program and what are the requirements?
I'll speak directly to the one I'm asked the most about, and that's our early learning centers, the preschools. So the 6 to 8 weeks to school age. The lead teachers, we call them lead teachers, the ones who head up the rooms of children, have 4-year degrees in something in the childcare field. Traditionally, it's early learning education or early childcare education, something of that nature. The assistant teachers, Richard, would be more along the lines of the associate degree I've talked to you about and some experience in caring for children. And then we have entry-level roles that aren't even to the level of assistant teacher that would just be assisting the assistant teachers, and those would be people who are high school graduates. So there's opportunity for advancement, and we try to work on that as well when we recruit. The other pieces, like summer camp counselors, the people who cover our before and after care are often our childcare, some other childcare staff who perhaps want to work part-time instead of full-time. So they'll just do some of those hours. So those folks are actually have some background in childcare as well. Summer camp counselors traditionally are what you might imagine. It's a lot of college students and those that are learning. And our directors of summer camp are those that have the degrees in the field of study. Upskilling, John, and reskilling. Upskilling. So one of the things we've asked for funding in the legislature this year was to help us figure out ways to give a little more to the existing childcare staff employed in our state. So again, I mentioned earlier that staff have to receive 40 hours of continuing education annually in childcare just to maintain their certifications. So that's a lot. That's a lot. And then how do we give them more than that? How do we support them in a stronger way? Can we help them with their educational component in some way? Could there be funding for that? Are there ways to help them diversify their skill sets? And one thing I would say, like, say someone is certified in infant care and we have these different certifications for the age groups of children. Perhaps we get them cross-certified in toddler care and preschool care so that their skill set could broaden. They could then perhaps earn more and perhaps have more skills to continue forward. One thing I will say about the YMCA is that we understand there's generally two areas of employees or two types of employees that work with us. Some are career Y employees that become salaried leadership staff who run departments like executive directors of childcare, things like that. Those folks are often make the Y their profession. Then we also recognize that we're a lot of first employment opportunities or first or second jobs for folks moving forward in their careers. And we encourage, and in fact, we lose in a positive way, a lot of our childcare staff to the school systems. As teachers and educators work their way through childcare, they often gain their experience, further their degree status, and then they can go on into the school system in various capacities. So we're proud of being that feeder system. So we try to make sure there are ways to help with those skill sets. You also ask about reskilling. I'm trying to think of anything in this area. Nothing's coming to mind on reskilling, John, other than internal work. Nothing in the area that I can think of.
Thanks. We've got time for one more question. I wondered is there possible that you could stay after one to answer questions once
Yes.
the official meeting is over, Melissa?
Sure.
Okay, great.
Sure.
Well, I'll give you this one question and then we'll hold off on the others till after we close the meeting. This is from Diane Lebson. As the Y considers partnerships with churches, are there any changes that need to be made to the curriculum so that the children's experience remains aligned with the Y's and the church's unique missions ?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I will say for the most part, and make sure I'm understanding it correctly, Diane, the churches are super about being space only and making sure that it just fulfills their sort of social responsibility mission. And we mirror and take our exact Y programming into those locations with the permission and understanding and conversation with the church. So we haven't had any challenges. And if there were some sort of conflict or issue with that, we would definitely resolve it prior to, or perhaps not go to that location if it wasn't something that was suitable. But we've been very, very fortunate in the goodwill from the local churches and spacing.
Great,
Melissa,
thank
I
you.
want to thank you. As you see, there are several more questions, but we're running a little late here, so we'll take a short break from.
Okay, let's see. We had another one, Melissa, from Bob. that how can someone making 45,000 per year afford 10,400 in childcare?
They can't, Bob, unless they apply for state subsidy for sure. So if that family presented to me at the Y, we would have them fill out their application, and they would fill out their financial request application. And then based upon that, we would help them get attached to DHHS, who would then see if they qualify for that subsidy. And then whatever would be left after that, we would help them with that. So sort of a 3-tiered process.
Thank you. This is from John Goss. Is childcare defined as an infrastructure need / category in the current Biden stimulus bill? I have been told that the county funds coming to Knox would be limited to physical infrastructure, water, sewer, and broadband.
Good, John. You're calling out the lawyer talk here, because so childcare is a concern in the Biden stimulus bill. Yes, it's something they've talked about, and it's something that a lot of funds have come through the state from the federal government already to support child cares, and particularly nonprofit child cares. So those are still coming our way. Our argument is about the physical piece, is we're trying to wrap around that definition and say that that includes physical child care sites. So that's where we're trying to play a bit with the language and the definitions. Whether that's successful, I do not know, but that's what we're working on. So.
Thank you.
Melissa, one of the things, just following up a little bit on John's earlier questions about the reskilling, upskilling, do you have, I mean, there's sort of some current movements and interest in using, let's say the Mid-Coast Technology School was one of the things we're looking at, is for running a program that for, let's say if there was a curriculum for some of your staff, some of your positions in childcare, that we might work with Bobby over there and get a course developed for childcare workers. And is there anything? Is it that well defined, or isn't there really a good set curriculum to use with your different kinds of people?
Richard, I think that's a fabulous idea. We would support that 100%. And I think there's a way we could craft a curricula around that to make sure that we could do something. I think one of the things we've been looking toward is where are there pockets of people that we can actually help get more skills to have these jobs to help us fill. That's one. The other place we're working with is partnering with the Knox County Homeless Coalition. And many times Stephanie Prim and her team will have unhoused persons that are living in some of their spaces for up to a year or more. So if they've got someone who is in a defined space and could qualify, meet all the other qualifications, could we train those persons to actually and transport them to work in childcare? Trying to be creative with people that are in a space and for whatever reason are going to be with us for a period of time. How can we help them get the training? And that's people that are right here in our mid-coast. So it's a great idea. I would love to talk more about that.
Good. Yeah, Bobby we're trying to come up with, one of the areas we're looking at is the broadband technical service laying cable for the fiber, and working with fiber special skills, and we're talking to him about that. But we've sort of committed to coming up with one program this fall that he can start. It's new. That's helping in this workforce development arena, childcare arena.
That would be astonishing. I'd love to talk more, and I can definitely connect you to those who know much more than me who can help with that process.
Okay.
I think that's it. Chris, back to you.
Chris, some of our members aren't very comfortable with chat. Do we have any?
Yeah, I'd open it up at this point. If anybody has a question and they weren't able to enter it electronically, please just unmute yourself and fire away.
Actually, I just thought of one, Melissa. This may be wrong, but do you ever think about trying to get older people to work in early childhood?
Not wrong at all, Joan. Actually, the two largest areas for us in recruiting staff are the high school population and the retired population.
Oh, okay, right, good.
So absolutely.
It's illogical.
No, we would love to get more. One of the challenges we've run into a little with childcare is that it can be a very physical job. So sometimes that's a challenge depending on the person. But one of our best lead teachers right now is someone who's retired from the school system, and she's outstanding. So that knowledge base and that ability to have time to work is it's crucial for us.
And that reminds me, Melissa, that thinking about Clark, are you still on? And one of the things that we do is with our club, we've committed to the Meals on Wheels program. And so a number of us have commit a morning, a month, some maybe more, but let's say a minimum of a morning a month. I mean, your programs probably, in other words, I'm trying to think, is there an equivalent help to your childcare program where a Rotary Club could sign up and provide, X number of days of service, and it wouldn't necessarily be the same person every time, but that you would get, some assistance where, like, we go down and drive meals, we come and do some work with childcare. That's
a very interesting idea, Richard. That's never crossed my mind. Perhaps that's
yeah. I mean, there's a lot of complication. I mean, you get involved with.
Yeah, it's running through my mind. I'm thinking about the requirements. You have to be fingerprinted, background checked, but all those things are not bars. It would just be a little bit. Say there was a core group of 10 people who wanted to do that. Everyone would just do it together. Everybody get fingerprinted. Everybody would get background checked. And then we could figure out what that could look like. That's a very intriguing idea.
Yeah, and then you could count on 2 of those people coming on one day a month, the same day, and 2 another week, and so on. So you could really get a regular pattern established.
I like that idea very much.
Do you think there's any of us that could pass the background check?
See, that's an entirely separate question, so I'm not going to touch that one now. The fingerprinting might throw you all off. I don't know.
But it's also another one of those, Melissa, where we could get Rockland, Belfast, or Rockland, West Bay, and Camden to each contribute X, 2, 3, whatever it is, members that would sign up and be regulars, that to spread it out amongst a larger group of people too.
That is a great idea. Great idea, Richard. I'm gonna sort that one out in my head. I'll be circling back to you.
Okay.
I like that.
Clark's an expert at this, so we can ask Clark to pitch in.
Yeah, I have to speak. Driving meals where every 15 minutes or so you stop the car and you take the meal up and hand it to a person is one thing. Riding herd on a 4-year-old, you sound like somebody who has no experience. I don't know about 70-plus-year-olds, trying to ride herd on 4-year-olds. I love the idea.
Any other questions for Melissa, folks? Melissa, again, I want to thank you very much for joining us today. And it's a great amount of information you provided us. And again, the support that you provide our community is fantastic. So thanks very much for all you folks do at the YMCA.
Thanks to all of you, Camden Rotary. I love you all, and it's so great to be with you again. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
With that, I'm going to officially end today's meeting. Folks, have a great day.